Hello, good morning everyone. Thank you so much for coming today and joining our panel, What is the Future of Chinatown? We're very excited to be a part of the very first South by Southwest Sydney convention, and I hope you enjoy the topic today. We'll be discussing a very important precinct within the heart of Sydney, Chinatown. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge that we are meeting today on Gadigal land of the Eora Nation, and I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. And on the topic of country, Chinatown does sit at a three-point crossroad of identities. It is part of Aboriginal land. It is within the heart of the Sydney and Australian business precinct in the CBD. And it's also the cultural heart of the Asian Australian community. And balancing the needs of all three of those identities is a very difficult task. For those of you who are familiar with Sydney's Chinatown, it's just on the other side of Darling Harbour. It has been the traditional heart of the Asian Australian community since the 1800s. It's a place of gathering, it's a place of history and culture, it's a place of food and entertainment. It's a very popular tourist destination and also contributes billions of dollars to the Australian economy every year. But the traditional role of Chinatown has changed over the years, especially after COVID. We're in a period of healing and change, but the history and cultural heart of Chinatown still beats strongly in every Australian Asian person within Sydney and Australia and abroad. What we would like to discuss today is, what does the future of Chinatown look like, and what are the opportunities to reshape and revitalize Chinatown for the next generation of Asian Australians? To help us answer that very big question, we have our panelists today. Please welcome Qianyi Lim. She is an architect and director of Sibling Architecture. And she's also working with the City of Sydney on the Dixon Street South Revitalisation Project. We've got Dan Hong, the Executive Chef of Maryvale. He has been a local resident of Chinatown and also a celebrity chef and food enthusiast. He's a shy and also a very shy person. We've also got Brad Chan, entrepreneur and CEO of Bana Group. And he's also a big community leader within Chinatown. He established Haymarket HQ as a co-working space for local business and entrepreneurs, and also a supporter of Soul of Chinatown, who is the host of the panel today. So please give a big round of applause and welcome to our panelists. My name is Eddie Ma. I am also an architect, but today I represent Soul of Chinatown, who are the hosts of the panel today. Bit about Soul of Chinatown. We are a not-for-profit community group with an aim to preserve the history, culture and traditions of Sydney's Chinatown and its community, but also looking to the future. It was founded by Hayden Wong, Kevin Cheng and Peter Wong in 2021 as just an Instagram account, where during COVID they wanted to document the different stories and cultural aspects of Chinatown, and it's now grown into a community within the precinct and advocating to council for new projects, public art, events and activation projects. What they've done so far is storytelling through Instagram. We're also fundraising through the Chinatown Rice Fund to gather necessary essentials for elderly Asian members of the community. We also run activations such as Neon Playground. If everyone remembers all those neon lights that were in Dixon Street earlier this year. And we're also working on a mural in front of Donggama on Thomas Street, the Thomas Street Square, and running events such as the Asian Chinatown Comedy Club to share the cultural heritage in a more fun and exciting way. So for the panel today, we would love to hear from you and hear your contributions, your stories, your ideas. We will be using Slido. The participant code is on there. If you just jump on slido.com and enter the code, you can enter any questions you have as the presentation goes on, and we'll take the questions at the end of the panel discussion. Don't worry, I'll put this slide back up at the end when we're answering questions. Just a bit of brief history as context for Chinatown. I surely didn't know, that the first Chinese immigrants actually established a Chinatown in the rocks. So from the 1850s, the first immigrants moved to Australia looking for opportunities and work. That then evolved and grew through the 1800s down south to what is now Surrey Hills and Haymarket. And finally, in the 1960s, there was a movement to establish an official Chinatown on Dixon Street. And in 1984, those iconic Pai Fung gates were established, and Dixon Street was closed to traffic and became what it is today. That's when my family came, and that's what most people remember as the heyday of Chinatown. So through the 1980s to the 2000s, the area was booming, lots of activity. Unfortunately, due to changing immigrations, more of the Chinese community have moved out to the suburbs, and with COVID shutdowns, it has really hit the community very hard. You'll notice a lot more vacant shop fronts, and we're in a period of healing. We're trying to recover from the impacts of COVID, still trying to recover. And today we would like to discuss any ideas and opportunities that the panelists might have, the audience, you guys might have, for how do we bring back the excitement and the vibrancy that we all remember, and also reshape the community for the needs of the present. So the first question to the panelists, what is your relationship to Chinatown, and what is your favorite memory? I think we'll start with Qianyi, since we're right here.
Okay, so I'm sure all of us are going to talk about food, but I grew up in the northern part of Sydney, and so coming into Chinatown was about also not only eating great yum cha places like Regal and Marigold, but also doing the weekly Chinese supermarket shopping. So I remember pulling up, double parking outside PK at the Prince Centre or Burlington, and mum or dad just running down and doing a really quick shop. So shopping for food, big memory. That was probably when I was younger. I guess for me, Chinatown also in my high school years was a place of discovery and escape. So on those days where I might be wagging school, Chinatown would be where I would go to. No one seemed to be bothered that I was walking around in my school uniform, but there was always that kind of sense of discovery in places like Dixon House, going up the escalator, and just this sensory delight of all the Chinese herbal medicine stores and really outdated travel agents. And then stumbling across places like Qianyi Coffee Lounge. It always felt like there was something new to discover in Chinatown.
Yeah, so look, my fondest memories are two parts to it. Obviously, I grew up in Epping, so going to Chinatown with my family was a treat, especially on the weekends to have yum cha, whether it be at Silver Spring, Regal, or something like that. But also when I was a young chef, I was doing fine dining. I wasn't doing anything to do with Chinese food or Asian food. So on the weekend, I'd be craving, as a young chef, I'd be craving Asian food. I'd go to places like, Chinese noodle restaurant to have, handmade noodles and dumplings super cheap. And then after service as a young chef with all the other boys in the brigade, late at night, we'd go to places like Super Bowl, or if we had a bit more money or we were a bit more drunk, we'd splurge at Golden Century and have supper at, close to 4 a.m. after going out to like Surrey Hills for a few beers. And they were the fondest memories I have of Chinatown. And then that grew into me having a dream of living in Chinatown. And so I've actually achieved that dream 10 years ago when I moved to Chinatown and raised my family there and so on. So that's why I've got such a love for Haymarket in Chinatown.
Cool, I'm sure Dan's tried every restaurant in Chinatown by now. My family has a long history with Chinatown. So I run a property group. We own and manage our own shopping centres around Sydney, but also we have some properties in Chinatown, which we've had for over 50 years. So I grew up in the area. My grandfather was part of the original Dixon Street committee that helped convert Dixon Street into a pedestrian mall and put up those archways, and so his name's up on those archways. And I guess for me, I'm just trying to continue that legacy. Some of my memories, and I've probably got 3 distinct memories of Chinatown growing up, and I'll try not to focus on food because that's already a common theme. As a kid, I used to love going to Paddy's Market. That was quality shopping for me. I used to love buying gadgets, and my first tape recorder was from Paddy's Market. I remember when the top 40 countdown would be on, I'd press record and try to record the songs that I liked. And that shopping probably then shifted to buying fake night clothes at Paddy's Markets as well. So it's given me a lot over the years, Paddy's. As a high school student, I like going to Chinatown. They used to have a Chinatown cinema, and I used to watch kung fu movies. Back in those days, my ambition was to become the next kung fu star, so it didn't happen, but it was a good period of my life. And then as I got a little bit older, I have also memories of ending up in Chinatown after a late night, and late night, whether it's singing karaoke or going to an Asian dance party. There were those things back in those days. So, but we always ended up in Chinatown, probably at Super Bowl or just having some congee for some food.
Was it Cashbox karaoke that you went to?
Yeah, so Cashbox Karaoke is now called Dynasty Karaoke. It's actually in one of our buildings, but yeah, Cashbox is an institution for karaoke back in those days. Yeah.
I still remember like working on Chinatown streets, and if you saw me there, I hope you recognize me. But all the different karaoke places, all the food places, were just. It was so vibrant, and I'm glad that everyone shares those deep memories. As everyone else in the audience who's been to Chinatown, I hope food is probably taking up a big space in your mind right now.
Yeah, but I think the other point is, I think the future of Chinatown is not just about the food. I think there's a lot of other things that we could look at in terms of revitalising and rejuvenating it and making it interesting. As I mentioned, as a kid, I went to the cinemas there. The karaoke was, part of my upbringing, different things like that.
Amazing. Well, that brings us to the next topic. What do you think are the biggest challenges to reshaping Chinatown and revitalising it? Might get Brad continue.
Our biggest challenges, I think, I'd say the biggest challenges, maybe the 2 biggest challenges are, number one is inertia, because it's easy to do nothing. We all recognise that Chinatown's decline, and this is probably reflective of Chinatowns around the world. There's been a general decline and relevance of Chinatowns around the world, but obviously Sydney's Chinatown has declined, and it's quite easy just to continue with the status quo. And I think that will, and Chinatown's sort of hasn't died by 1,000 cuts, but it's had 3 or 4 big hits over the last decade, which has I guess affected it. And so if we do nothing, I think that's a real issue. Probably the second thing I'd say is the biggest challenge is the lack of imagination that we could have in terms of what it could be. I think if we can think not only just from a food perspective, but even beyond that, and try to be creative and imaginative of things that we could experiment with. And I think experimentation is really great for precincts. It could be anything that we want it to be.
Dan?
Look, I can only really mostly speak on food, I guess, but I think the biggest challenges is that obviously there have been over the years, the past 10 years, there have been areas of other Chinatowns popping up in Sydney, whether it be Burwood or even Eastwood and something like that. So there are other options for Sydney people to go, and they possibly have, I would say, more exciting restaurants. They probably have cheaper parking. Just sort of these little things that make people probably, overlook Chinatown these days. And probably, I would say for small business, I would assume that the rent would probably be a bit more than, say, the other suburban places. Right? You know what I mean? Like, and the buildings are older, so you know.
Yeah, you're probably right, and property works in cycles as well. So there were good times to get into areas, and there were probably tougher times.
Yes.
Yeah, I think, echoing both Dan and Brad's comments, there are, I think in Chinatown, we've obviously seen a real success in Darling Square and that precinct, and that's pulled away a lot of the, I guess, energy, the chi from Dixon Street in Chinatown. But I think what's really special about Dixon Street Chinatown is that it's made up of a whole cluster of different kind of retailers and small business owners. And I think what the challenge is making it easy for them to operate, giving them incentives to be able to, keep their businesses flourishing, the facades of their buildings, the awnings of their buildings, up to quality and standard. So I guess having benevolent developers who, people like Brad who see, I guess, the value in having this diversity of type of business in this area, I think is really important.
Yes, it's definitely, I like, Brad's comment of, it's many issues piling up on each other. It's not just one, and it's happened over many years. So it's going to take just as much effort to bring it back and renew Chinatown as a precinct and elevate its offerings. So I guess now we go to the bright ideas that everyone might have, and also what opportunities do we have to fix some of these problems? What does the future of Chinatown look like to you? I might pick Qianyi, only because Qianyi is currently working on the Dixon Street South concept design. So if you have any ideas or updates from that project?
Yeah, I'm not sure how much everyone knows about the project, but we're working with Aspect Studios, an urban design landscape practice based here in Sydney, for the City of Sydney and for the community of Chinatown on the, revitalisation of Dixon Street, so the public realm, which is a really exciting project to be working on. I've been, completely, engrossed with this project. It's been really, an honour to be meeting some of the people who first established Chinatown, who installed the gates, who, the first kind of group of community leaders that, made Chinatown what it is today. And what's been really enlightening is hearing the stories of these people. So, whilst we're working on the public realm, the architecture and the physical built environment, I think that there's a real opportunity to embed some of the, intangible kind of cultural aspects of Chinatown in place. So, as architects and city makers, we're always aware of the heritage value of buildings, of physical, items within the built environment. But there are also these really special, intangible cultural heritage items that we need to somehow give space for. So when I say that, I mean, how do we give space for elders to congregate and meet and, do things like, practice qigong, or how do we, give space for, groups of school children to learn about the history of Chinatown? How do we embed these stories in place? I'm sure there's so many ways from a, technology and innovation point of view that we can do that. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I might pass it to Dan now. What ideas have you come across, and how would you like to change Chinatown?
There's so many ideas that come to mind. I can only look back to how my fondest memories of Chinatown, and I would love to obviously revamp the whole place, but still have some type of nostalgic sort of memory that everyone has it still ties back to some of those nostalgic memories that everyone has of the early Chinatown. For example, you know, I'm not sure if everyone thinks of Chinatown as a place where you go to a food court and, you know, you see, you know, the sizzling platters go along the food court, smoking up like Dixon Street Food Court and places like Eating World. You know, the only one left is Sussex Food Court. And it's sort of like, I would love to see sort of like a revamp of food courts, you know, within that Chinatown area. Obviously, I mean, and then obviously not just the food, but, you know, obviously we need to continue to have, you know, certain, you know, regular events, you know, like, you know, the stuff like Neon Playground and showed the success of that was amazing. So we need to constantly have regular events for people to come back to Chinatown, not just for food, and even we need to also see Chinatown as a not 24 hour, but a place where you can go. You know, we want to bring back that sort of nightlife as well, which is still missing, to be honest. Like, you know, with more restaurants that are able to, you know, where people can go to Chinatown, still go to Chinatown late at night, because you know, it's kind of died. You know, if you talk to all the chefs, they usually go to like Korean restaurants now, and not like sort of, you know, not the memories of of my generation going to like Golden Century or Super Bowl or something like that. So it's those many different factors that I'd like to see the new Chinatown. You know, whether it be a curated thing, you know, just to make sure Chinatown makes it more exciting with many different options, not just Asian food. That could bring more people in, but, you know, maybe a curated thing might seem a bit too, I don't know, tacky. So it's sort of maybe a bit of a balance is kind of good, where you sort of have those traditional sort of regional Chinese cuisines, and then maybe something new. You know what I mean? Like, you know, Chinatown needs to be known as not just a place where you come and eat Asian food. You know what I mean? So who knows?
I think on the topic of Neon Playground, Brad, do you want to talk about how activation has helped to improve Chinatown after COVID?
Yeah, sure. So for those of you not aware, Neon Playground was a festival late last year. It was 3 or 4 weeks of lights, music, arts, entertainment. It was a bit of an experiment. It was an idea that formed pretty quickly. There was a grant available at the City of Sydney. It was a one-off grant, so I applied for it and was successful. And so put together a group of stakeholders who were, I guess, really good at what they did in their respective areas. And probably 3 months of planning, we executed a festival that the tagline was Chinatown like you've never seen before. And, you know, the idea was to work with local Asian Australian artists with some installations that were neon based and bright. We had a block party in the middle of Dixon Street, and it was just about bringing people back to Chinatown post-COVID that probably didn't see much of a reason to come back anymore. And you know, also try to encourage the younger generation who are very Instagram focused to come and take photos and share photos and all that kind of stuff. So it exceeded our expectations. Yeah, but cost a bit of money, and that kind of money is not recurring, so still working on it. If I can answer the question around other ideas, I mean, I think I could do a whole lecture on ideas for Chinatown, but I go back to what Dan said earlier about other suburban Chinatowns that have come up, and so the question is, well, why would people bother to come to Haymarket Chinatown when they can more easily get good food and probably more convenient, get parking in other locations? At the same time, there's also Darling Square, which is a new precinct, a real retail precinct that's open across the road from Chinatown. And so how can Chinatown compete with the likes of, you know, all the new things around? Because there's a lot of competition. You're competing for the same customer dollar. And I think if I was looking at it overall, I'd probably focus on 3 key areas. So firstly, physical. Most people realise Chinatown is tired and needs some sort of physical upgrade, whether it's the buildings, facades, or whether it's the public domain. And if it's the public domain, how do you make the public domain alive? Because that's what people want. They want an experience. I've just started playing pickleball, so I sort of think, well, we could set up a pickleball court in Dixon Street. But whether it's pickleball or mahjong or tai chi or kung fu exhibitions, you could really bring the streets alive. The second part around, the second thing I look at is the economic side, and it needs a good mix of businesses and clustering to make it attractive, to make it appealing for people to come out. And I had a chat to Dan before, would you open a restaurant in Chinatown? He said, oh, depends on my boss, but who would go to a restaurant that Dan opened himself in Chinatown? Yeah, I'm sure you all would. So anyway, I'll keep working on him. He did mention rent before, so I'll have a chat.
That's a good deal for you, Brad.
Yeah, definitely. But I think what makes Darling Square across the road successful is it is a curated mix of tenants. They've brought really strong retailers, and so if you want to go somewhere to eat, you can go there and there'll be a good selection. And so I think Chinatown needs to identify where the gaps are in terms of potential opportunities, and it could be desserts because there's not a lot of dessert options I know, or it could be entertainment. Look at that claw machine shop, Million Life, that's opened in Chinatown.
Oh, my kids love that, man.
I love it. I have an addiction there. I cannot walk past Million Life without having to go because I always see a little fluffy toy there that I don't need, or my kids don't need, but I reckon I can get that. So, but $20 later I've got it, but it's probably worth $2. And then the third point I look at is the cultural side, because I think that's something the suburban Chinatowns don't have. Our Chinatown has a rich history and a rich cultural fabric attached to it. And so the challenge is, how do we bring that out to the people? And I know other Chinatowns around the world have Chinatown storytelling centres. But even murals, could you bring out the history of Chinatown through blank walls around Chinatown? There's some social movements happening in the US in some Chinatowns where that second, third generation of Chinese Americans have this nostalgia about Chinatown and they're concerned about how it's declined. And so they've formed different groups to protect and enhance Chinatown. There's a Chinatown Runners Club, so a group of runners that run through different Chinatowns in the US. That's so cool, and I've got these t-shirts, Chinatown Runners. So there's an opportunity for the younger generation to come out and get involved in, I guess, a new evolved Chinatown as well. Again, like I said, I could do a whole lecture on different things for Chinatown, but there's so much we could think about.
Just on that cultural side as well, I think what we have just in the vicinity also are institutions like Foray, Centre for Contemporary Asian Art, which has been there for years, and there is definitely like a pool of that kind of contemporary Asian art culture that filters into Chinatown and Haymarket. And then there's MOCA, the Museum of Chinese Australia, that is going to open soon.
Hopefully it opens soon. But even growing up, there was the Chinese Youth League building in Dixon Street, which had line dance. You could do learn how to do line dancing, and upstairs they had Tai Chi and different cultural elements to it, and they've since sold off, I think, for a restaurant and things like that. I guess the money's there, but there's probably opportunities to reintroduce some of those things. What I really love nearby is those Asian hip hop dancers just outside the ICC. I'd love to stop and just spend time watching them. I'd probably look creepy though. But bringing those kinds of elements into Chinatown would be awesome.
They're more K-pop. Yeah.
Just letting you know. I can only name one K-pop band, I think.
Asian popular culture has many different aspects, and I can't keep track either. But you know, we have a new generation of Asian Australians that have different needs, different interests. You know, I was into Cantonese pop, now it's K-pop. You know, there's gacha machines, millionaire, even the food offerings have changed a lot. Dan, have you come across any other changes in your industry, the food industry, and how we can celebrate more culture through, I guess, 10 years talked about intangible cultural assets, Brad's talked about activation. Like, have you come across any interesting food aspects of cultural
Look,
celebration?
no, I mean, I just noticed there's been, because obviously I grew up late 80s, early 90s, Sydney, where Chinatown was more seen as like a Cantonese hub. You know, every third shop was like a barbecue shop or a wonton noodle shop or you know, a place where you'd have Cantonese food. But obviously over the past 10 years, it's moved into more regional Chinese cuisine, whether it be hot pot, you know, skewers. You know, I think that's the latest trend, the fried skewers and Sichuan cuisine and stuff like that. But I've noticed sort of the past few years, it's coming back, which is sort of like they're bringing back, you know, with the Hong Kong style cafes, and you know, even the takeover of the you know, the old Golden Century Royal Palace. They're bringing back, you know, even though Marigold shut down, Young Char's opened up at Royal Palace. So you know, I feel like it's, you know, it's coming around. And you know, this talk seems like Chinatown is in a really bad spot, but it's actually, it is improving. Like, it's just like we're not trying to say that it's like down here. It's not. It's actually, you probably agree that it's still, it's actually pretty good, you know. But it's more about, you know, where do we see Chinatown in 10 years?
Absolutely. I think since, you know, the start of COVID recovery to now, like Chinatown's activity has boomed. New restaurants and offerings are being created every day. So we are in a period of actually like recovering to what Chinatown used to be before COVID. But on that note, we've got a lot of questions coming through Slido. If you guys want to add your questions now, I'll take them as we go. Otherwise, you can also raise your hand if you have any questions you want to ask. So on Slido, we've got a couple of questions relating to the physical environment and urban design. So the questions are there any good examples of Chinatowns around the world you've seen it revitalized? What would the future of character of Chinatown be? Would it be traditional or contemporary? And what is the role of green spaces in Chinatowns for activities such as you know, badminton, basketball, tai chi for youth, elders, and playgrounds? So I think we'll pass it to Qianyi to start, but guys, chime in if you want.
So the question was,
what's the future character of
future
Chinatown?
character, yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think, you know, we've talked a lot about Chinatown and Dixon Street, where I'm working, having the real kind of history. It's like the beating heart of Chinatown, and we've got these kind of physical markers at the gates, which are being restored, and they really mark, you know, they let people know that you're here, you've landed, but at the same time, there's a real kind of urge to keep Chinatown relevant for, you know, younger, future generations. But I think this kind of tension between the two is good, and what will make Dixon Street, Chinatown unique. Interestingly, when we've been out on community consultation, it seems to be a recurring comment across the younger kind of community members that they do want to have that heritage expressed in Chinatown, because I think there is a real, I guess, urge to want to connect back to, I guess, people's heritage and culture. So whether that be through interpretation, like kind of physical communication of some of the stories of different community members through, you know, the furniture or the paving elements that we have throughout the public realm, or whether that's through actually identifying heritage buildings that we can create a space for community activities to occur, such as I don't know, Tai Chi class or, you know, a Mahjong club. I'm actually learning Mahjong at the moment with a few others.
Yeah, there's an activation in Dixon Street.
Yeah. Well, we're going to see if we can take over. I think Lotus has the restaurant at the Chinese Gardens, but we're going to have Young Child Ann and just like pull out our board and see if we get kicked out.
Okay. Just,
But, like,
just
I
no
just-
money exchange, okay?
But yeah, just trying to find a place to do that. Maybe have people around us who might know how to play better than us to teach us would be amazing. But because we're in such an urban environment in the middle of the city, it is hard to find like these large kind of bigger spaces for larger kind of group activities to occur. I spent a lot of time in China, maybe a decade or so ago in Shanghai, and I feel like they really know how to do public space in terms of activating it. And you go through any of the parks and plazas there, and there's groups of people singing, there's groups of people dancing, there's groups of people kind of doing wet water calligraphy on the kind of hard spaces. And I'd love to see that here. In Melbourne, I used to live in Melbourne about 5-6 years ago, and in my commute into town you would see this group of senior citizen, elder Asian women. Well, it's just quite a diverse group, but they were doing line dancing like they would in China. And they'd be doing this in Federation Square or the Royal Exhibition Gardens. And I thought that was just like a great way for everyone to see, you know, a different demographic, an older demographic out in public space. So I think I went on a bit of a tangent, but
I could probably also talk about, I guess, other Chinatowns. I mean, most major cities have a Chinatown. There's something like 50 Chinatowns in the US, but most of them are in decline. For similar reasons why our Chinatown's been in decline. You know, there's competing suburban Chinatowns, and most Chinatowns have lost their relevance. What Vancouver Chinatown, I noticed that they've recently applied for UNESCO heritage status. So that was probably something a bit different, and I think if you can get that sort of label, it becomes more of a tourist attraction. So branding and reputation is also important for Chinatowns. In Sydney now, there's a couple of precincts that have purple flag status, which indicates it's a safe, vibrant precinct for nightlife as well. So there's things like that. I just got an email yesterday. The state government's piloting what they call business improvement districts. So these business improvement districts are sort of governance models used US and the UK, where the local businesses, the local community, basically run their own precincts, and so they're funded through taxes, through levies, and they work on marketing or different physical improvements for precincts, but it gives the power back to the local community rather than the government, the authorities. So that's something I'll definitely apply for Haymarket. And so, I mean, again, there's just so many opportunities for the area. I think, and the other point I'll make is, Dan mentioned he lives in Chinatown. Typically, the second generation, they don't want to live in Chinatown. Their parents lived there, it's too busy, they want more space, more land, so they move out to the suburbs, and that's where suburban Chinatowns are formed. But again, in the US, there seems to be a movement of second generation Chinese Americans moving back into Chinatowns, maybe because the rents are cheaper and so forth, but they also miss the vibrancy of the Chinatowns that they grew up in. And so, that's a really interesting thing happening. And, when you get that next generation moving in, you get I guess a different level of excitement as well. I think the dangers are with Chinatowns changing around gentrification, but also displacement, because Chinatown is also met a need for new immigrants that aren't wealthy, that looking for somewhere cheap to stay and close to the support that they need as they move to a new country as well. And sometimes as Chinatowns get gentrified and rents start to increase, it displaces some of those people.
I think definitely there's a common theme between all of the panelists' ideas is the role of people and bringing people into the precinct. I guess it is a difficult issue in Sydney in particular. Dan, do you want to comment about why you chose to stay in Chinatown and live in Chinatown and what it's like?
Food, right?
And the simple answer to that is that as soon as I leave my front door, I can go get a bowl of noodles. That's basically it. That was like, I can just walk 2 minutes and get some dumplings, some noodles, whatever it is, Thai food. That was the reasoning for me moving to Chinatown. That is it.
What's it like to live there?
Sorry?
What's it like to live there?
I mean, it's great, and it's just really convenient. Obviously endless food. My kid's backyard is Darling Square. But look, to be honest, even though I have a 3-bedroom apartment, it's getting too small. So, and the amount of 4-bedroom apartments in Chinatown is like less than 10, unless it's like a penthouse or something like that. So, yeah.
Can I just pick up on a comment as well? I mean, Dan said I think you said earlier you had 3 kids as well. So their backyard is Darling Square, the green area there, which is something that I guess we don't have in Chinatown. It's a space which has access to the sunlight, but it's also just a calm environment. You can be active there as well. I keep harping on to the city about relooking at the current trees in Chinatown. There are these huge weeping figs which sort of block out all the sunlight and give it a cold and dark feeling. It's a bit of a contentious issue, trying to get them to remove it, so they might remove some, I think. But I think it's an opportunity to start all over again and create something that will allow people to also want to sit in Dixon Street in Chinatown.
Well, I think if you talk about the physical, it's something as simple as, whether it be changing the footpath. Like, it just seems a little bit dirty, like, all the time. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, that's what my mum says as well.
Yeah.
It's the charm of Chinatown, isn't it? It's a little pudgy.
Yeah, but like even the places where you sit, you're like, oh, you reconsider even sitting there. Like that's what I mean. Like it's the physical part. Yeah.
Qianyi, have you come across any opportunities in your planning of Dixon Street to improve the green space and open space?
Well, I was just wondering whether some of those, like when we've been down at Dixon Street looking at the public realm, I'm always looking up because we've got those trees and yes, they're blocking some light. I won't talk too much about that. But I always question like what's happening on the upper levels of buildings along Dixon Street, and I just think, we have some more rooftop activation as well, because that would really, I think, add something to the dynamic of what's happening there. Everything seems to happen on the ground plane, but I think, when we're deep in the middle of the city, there's an opportunity to like bring some more life up onto the rooftops.
Yeah, agree. Yeah, like a rooftop bar or cinemas and different things like that. Yeah.
It's not been, to be honest, there's not been bars like in Chinatown, like nice bars. Like, you know what I mean?
That's it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm working with the guy that did all the leasing for Darling Square. He's sort of helping me on some things for my own buildings, but he was saying he worked on that Beehive building, what's it called? The Exchange building, and they tried to put a bar on the rooftop. And they were talking to some of the best operators, the bar operators in Sydney, and their response is, well, it's not going to work because the Asians don't drink. And it's probably a misconception, but so from an economic point of view, that's what they're looking at. And so, it was just an interesting comment anyway.
I don't know which agents they've been consulting with, but I'm very offended. Lots of very interesting ideas I want to dive into, but I also want to pass to the audience. Does anyone have any pressing questions they want to raise a hand and ask the panel? Yes?
Brad, before you talked that there were about 3 or 4 challenges that have hit Chinatown in the past decade or so.
Yep.
Could you detail what those were?
So I think one of them was the entertainment centre demolition. So entertainment centre used to be across the road from Chinatown, and Chinatown used to benefit from all the shows. The Sydney Kings basketball were regular occurrences there, and so everyone would just walk across and frequent the restaurants. And so that demolition was probably a big loss for the area. Subsequent to that, the construction of Darling Square. It's a new precinct which is hard to compete with. It's a new retail precinct. So there was something like 50 retail establishments there. So that's a lot of competition for Chinatown to compete against. Where it's curated really nicely. It has green areas. It has some of the best restaurants in Sydney as well. So that's something else. Suburban Chinatowns we spoke about before. That's impacted. Chinatown. COVID was a hit. So Chinatown got hit pretty early with COVID. So because Chinatown relies heavily on tourists and international students, they stopped coming in January 2020. And so we're only just seeing international students really return. So yeah, there's been a number of factors.
Do we think that the consumer really cares between Darling Square and Chinatown though? Like, do we not think it's also kind of a positive that that's there?
Yeah, I think the opportunity for Chinatown is to leverage off how well Darling Square is doing, because there's so many people there now. How do we bring those people across, even if it's dessert or for karaoke afterwards or something else to play in Million Life? So the consumers don't. I'd say, although for a lot of people, Dan mentioned there's a sense of nostalgia for a lot of people with Chinatown, and for Chinese Australians, Chinatown is a testament to their forefathers' struggles and resilience and all that kind of stuff. And so there's something really important for them, and they're really sorrowful to see it decline. For non-Asians, they've just got good memories of going to Chinatown in their youth, and they probably don't do that anymore. And so I think everyone has some level of affection to Chinatown, but you're right. They're going to go to where they think they can get a better meal or a better experience. And I think the key to Chinatown though is around diversity of experiences that are on offer. And those experiences aren't just food, they're everything else that could be brought into it. And like I said, trying to bring the history and the culture, which is something a lot of areas don't have or can't compete with, to the customer.
Yes, down the back.
Speaking of diversity, has there been anything you've seen in other cultures, and other cultural areas of importance that you could take those learnings over to Chinatown? So Thai Town, or anything like Little Italy, or what they've done in Harris Park for Indian culture and Indian food.
I feel like I'm talking a lot.
I was just going to say, I guess no one's really kind of mentioned how Sydney's Chinatown is really unique because we are just adjacent to this kind of Thai precinct and Korean precinct as well, and that adds so much to that melting pot of diversity as well. But in terms of what we can take from those cultures, I think in the Thai kind of town, you see a lot more of the food making happen kind of right at the street frontage. I think Chat Thai has their dessert station preparation happening there, and the food kind of shopping is pushed out onto the street and kind of takes over the full shop fronts. Because I feel like we don't have as many Chinese supermarkets in Chinatown that are visible. Obviously there's a big one down the bottom of Market City, and then there's a few others, but I feel like it's become a lot less visible. So, we've talked a lot about restaurants and food, but I think it's also still allowing space for those kind of supermarkets and daily.
For example, Eastwood, the Chinese part of Eastwood has more of that sort of on the street displays and stuff, which make it look a lot more authentic, I guess, to the locals.
Well, it feels like a real community, I guess. People doing the
community
shopping there, right?
Exactly.
I feel like Chinatown now has become more like a place you come for food, but you know, earlier I was talking about the Chinese herbal medicine shops and the really outdated travel agencies that used to be up in the upper levels of Dixon House. Like, where are they? Do they still exist in Chinatown? Are they all gone? Is that because that community, the community they were servicing is no longer there? Or, yeah.
You know, you just book your tickets online these days. You don't need to go to
True.
Revelation.
Actually, I booked tickets with a travel agent for my trip next week. It was really, really good. Like, I don't know if anyone's actually used a travel agent before. I've used it maybe twice. They plan everything for you. If you want to go to multiple countries, and Asia in particular, like, it is very good. But also just having someone from your own cultural background that you can just walk in and talk to, I think that's a big charm of Chinatown.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is I think there's an opportunity for rebranding for a lot of these areas, and it's an interesting phenomenon. These little Tokyos and Thai towns and Koreatowns and Chinatowns. You know, they work well because of that clustering effect. But I think there's a lot more opportunities to just provide more exposure. And you know, through social media these days, you know, you could really tell the customer a lot more about what's you know, in the precinct, and whether it's, you know, different types of food that people haven't experienced before, or, you know, hidden gems in the area and things like that. So I think, you know, again, why Darling Square also works well, and because I'm in the shopping industry, I you know, we do the same thing where we collect marketing levies from all our tenants. We pool those funds and we can spend money on marketing our shops, so our shopping centres, and running events and activations and all that kind of stuff. Most precincts don't have that luxury because they don't have the funds. So I think there's definitely opportunities, you know, with a little bit of money or a lot of money to work on branding the precincts and then marketing and communicating what's in those areas.
I might actually ask Dan to add to that topic of branding. Obviously, you work with Maribel, one of the leaders in food and promoting their offerings. Are there any lessons that you think we could bring into Chinatown to help build that?
Well, the thing about Asian or Chinese restaurants, especially owned by Chinese operators or Asian operators, is that they don't celebrate the chef, right? The head chef. You know, the head chef's usually just in the kitchen just doing their own thing. And I think maybe there's something there, whether it be a community kitchen space that holds cooking classes, paid cooking classes, much like the Sydney Seafood School, where each class could be celebrating the head chef of, let's say, for example, Royal Pavilion, or the head chef of Super Bowl or something, that could do cooking classes that people paid for, which not only obviously celebrated the restaurant and marketed the restaurant, but also it marketed, you know, it could, you know, a lot of Chinese cooking, Asian cooking still seems like a mystery to people, like quite difficult to cook at home. So sort of, you know, to show people how it could be easy to, you know, cook a simple stir fry at home or something like that. And celebrating the chef, celebrating Chinatown, marketing the restaurant as well. So many different things that, you know, could be promoted in that sense there.
I really think Dan should open his restaurant. I think, sorry, the other point I was going to make was, you know, typically when I look at an area, I'd look at what assets it has. And I've spoken about the history and the culture and stuff like that. But we've also got strong advocates for Chinatown. I was on the board of the Museum of Chinese Australia with Adam Lior, so I think did he win MasterChef? Anyway, a well-known chef. You know, we've got Dan, who lives in Chinatown. You know, Dan's got, I think, over 100,000 followers on Instagram. I've got about 100, so together we've got 100,100, you know, 2 people. So, you know, I think there are opportunities we could take more advantage of.
Any other questions from the audience? Yeah.
Do you think with the cost of living it's going to bring more people back to China? Because, like, I know myself, I would go there for lunch with a $10 note and I can get a very decent lunch. Do you think
affordable food.
Well, that's what, for me, I think that's what draws people back anyway. Like, I don't think that stopped people from coming. That was the reason a lot of people came to Chinatown, and I hope with the whole refurb over the next 10 years or whatever, that the prices don't go up too much, you know what I mean? Because we still want Chinatown to be known as a place where you can grab a decent feed, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, good point. And I think, like I said earlier, I think Chinatown needs diversity, so you need the cheap bits, but you also need the, you know, higher priced food. I recently put Gamshara, the Japanese ramen place, in our building, and they were a Chinatown institution. They were going to leave, and we managed to convince them to open. And they opened about 2 weeks ago, and they've had lines, lunch and dinner, every day. And before they opened, we said, why don't you spend a bit more money on your fit out and different things like that? And they said, no, we don't want to, because otherwise we'd have to increase the prices of our food. Which was really interesting. They knew their customer, they knew that there was a particular price point to meet. You know, my gripe at the moment is when I go to Yumcha, I don't know, for whatever reason, it's really expensive these days. When we were growing up, it was so cheap. So, you know, Yumcha's sort of gone from a regular occurrence to...
The trick is you got to go with like minimum 8 people. That's how it becomes cheaper.
Okay, I'll take that tip.
Brad, if everyone feels like a feed afterwards, where is Gamshara now?
It's actually just across the road from Darling Square. So we also have the number 1 Korean barbecue restaurant in Sydney, Bonga. It's in that building on the corner of Harbour Street and Little Hayes Street. So, but yeah, I mean, I wasn't sure whether I'd mentioned this, but I'm currently looking at that building in terms of a way to spend money on improving the facade, making it stand out, because it's sort of become like a gateway to Chinatown, because all the activities now on the Darling Quarter side, you've got several thousand residents there, and so people are looking across the road thinking, well, why do I bother crossing the road? And so sort of thinking maybe my building could be a draw card over. And so I'm working with the architect that worked on Burwood Chinatown, which you know, is a really thriving building on just again making a building attractive and stand out. Unfortunately, the City of Sydney are a lot more progressive and relaxed with some of their rules around this kind of stuff, which I never would have imagined before. So there's a couple of City of Sydney people here. So yeah, well done to them.
Well, we might take one more question. Anyone got anything pressing? No? Well, I've got a question. Oh, wait, sorry. Answer. No, you go. It's okay.
I wonder then, like, what's at stake if Chinatown is not revived in the next, like, say, five years? Like, where do your hearts and minds feel with that? Like, what's so pressing to you about keeping Chinatown alive?
I mean, I just, you know, I feel like it will be revived. I have no doubt about it. You know, Chinese people, we got this. The community is strong, I think. So what's at stake, I guess, is just, yeah, making sure that the community have their place that they can keep coming to. But as long as they're there and fighting for it, yeah.
Yeah, and I think the question is, well, what happens if it just stays the same? It just stays the same, nothing changes. It loses its relevance. But, you know, a lot of people I speak to about Chinatown is they just feel sad. They just feel sad that it's not the Chinatown, the vibrant Chinatown that they grew up with. And so, yeah, it's everyone just wants to see it thrive again.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. If it stays the same, it will end up like Oxford Street, King's Cross, so on. So, but I believe, you know, with council, there's stuff in the works anyway, like it's happening. So physically, it's gonna get a change. So that, for me, keeps me positive, you know.
Yeah, and hopefully the physical changes that the City of Sydney do then are enough to lead the private owners and the businesses to also invest, because it needs investment. It needs people to recognise that if I put this money in, there's a return that's going to come out of it.
I think in terms of what's at stake, culturally it is a historical centre. There's so much, almost 200 years of history embedded within Chinatown. It's a huge loss if it just becomes any part of the city. But also, I think it will always be there because the people want it there. You've got locals who always come there, even just to walk through Chinatown. I'll just walk through Dixon Street for fun. And then the offerings come with that.
Yeah, definitely. And I saw a statistic recently. I think in the past, Chinatown probably used to be one of the top 5 destinations for tourists to visit. And I saw a chart recently by Destination New South Wales that ranked Chinatown as 17th in the whole list of Sydney. And so it was even behind Cronulla, which I was shocked with. Anyway, so it has some work to do.
I think that's a good caveat to my question is, if each of you got one genie's wish, what would you do to change Chinatown?
I'd open a new restaurant headed by the executive chef Dan Hong.
I mean, if it was really quick, I'd just fast forward the whole process of Dixon Street and the whole makeover of Dixon Street. I feel like just that physical makeover of Dixon Street will make such a difference. Yeah.
I mean, I think I mentioned it earlier, but I'd look at activating some of the higher levels of the buildings, the rooftops along Dixon Street.
If I had to answer this question seriously, I'd also get different levels of government involved. At the moment, the City of Sydney are probably the sole group that are investing in the area, but this is not just a local precinct, it's got state and international relevance. So I think with more money we can do more, and whether it's more events and festivals or whether it's changes physically to the public domain, and even Destination New South Wales could market Chinatown, because it's not really on their radar, I would say. They're more interested in Bondi Beach and the Opera House.
All right, well, that is our time for today. Obviously, please stay and talk to the panel, but thank you so much for taking the time out to attend our panel today. Can you please give a warm round of applause to our panelists? So, obviously this panel was hosted by Soul of Chinatown. If you want to get involved or stay in touch, that's our email, Instagram, and Facebook. Instagram is at Soul of Chinatown. And finally, we also run our Soul of Chinatown Rise Fund, which gathers funds to purchase essential goods for elderly Asians in and around Chinatown and Greater Sydney. If you would like to donate, please search our GoFundMe Rise Fund or use the QR code right there. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day. Thank you.